we are talking about ingredient list red flags. We get people talking to us all the time saying, well, I want to eat healthy. I want to do the right thing, but I don't, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to look for?
Yep. And how does that relate back to our weight journey?
We're going to talk about not only what to avoid, but why to avoid it. I think one of our primary foundations of how we practice is explaining why things are recommendations, because I think that keeps you a little more motivated to do those things if you know why you're doing them in the first place.
So yeah, the ingredient lists. So how should we go about reading an ingredient list? And so I think a good step is just to get things that don't have an ingredient list. That's usually a pretty good rule of thumb that you can stick to. But when you do look at an ingredient list, the first ingredient is the most of that substance. So in this instance would be corn, and then vegetable oils the second highest, and then so on and so forth. So whenever you read that ingredients list or turn it over and you look at it, that first thing is the most of what's in that substance. As you're reading through that, if there are bad things in there, if you can't pronounce them, most likely they're bad. But if there are bad things in there, it doesn't matter where they're at on that ingredient list, it's going to be a bad thing to ingest. The longer that list is, typically there's going to be something in there that's probably not favorable for you.
Yeah, and I think it's also a really good litmus test to see what that company has at its heart for you too. If this company is putting, let's just say, red 40, I can't even pronounce some of these things, but
yellow 6, yellow 5, maltodextrin,
disodium guar. I have some on my glasses on. Guaralonate. Yeah, Doritos. I don't think it's a surprise that Doritos probably doesn't have your health at its heart. So yeah, I think when you start seeing those things, they can just be little pings to say, do they care about me? Do they care about how my body is, how my body is sensitive to insulin, my chemical levels? And the answer is probably not.
No, and when you are looking at this, most people are like, "Oh, this probably isn't the best for me," and you're right. But the next question is, well, why are they doing some of this? And these ingredients, some of these ingredients is to enhance the flavor and the feel it has in your mouth, so it keeps you coming back for more. They want you to get you addicted to these foods, so you keep coming and buying their product. And the downside of that is we don't know what these things do long term, and really we don't know. A lot of these things are done one ingredient. They're like, this one ingredient doesn't affect me, but what about this one ingredient with all these 10 other ingredients together? What is that doing to us?
Yeah, like that compounding effect.
And we don't know. And so that's where we got to be cautious.
Yeah, some of the studies that we're basing food safety on are pretty outdated. Dr. George said they aren't done in isolation. They're not done with the way foods are processed nowadays.
So yeah, we're going to go through some ingredients.
Yeah, and most of these, I would imagine, are pretty common. People know about these. So we're going to start with high fructose corn syrup. There's, of course, other names for them because they can't make it easy on you. So there's hidden names for some of these things like high fructose corn syrup, looking at maize syrup, glucose syrup, fruit fructose. Sometimes I'll call it fructose corn syrup, but not high fructose corn syrup. So you just have to be a little bit more aware. And that's why we're educating, is because we want you to know what to look out for when you are looking at those ingredient lists.
Yeah, and fructose, remember, that one's really hard on insulin. And so when you're insulin and insulin sensitive diabetic, really hard to lose weight. And so the reason they use it is because it's cheaper and it has a longer shelf life. And so you can just take the opposite of that. Things with a shorter shelf life are probably better for you. So stick to the outsides of your grocery aisles, and things that don't have an ingredient list at all typically have a shorter shelf life and are healthier for you.
Yeah, it's insane, like the amount of foods that high fructose corn syrup are in, and how much we know that is linked to a lot of health issues: fatty liver, obesity, being overweight or obesity, insulin resistance, having those elevated triglycerides on your lipid panels. And then we know that high fructose corn syrup can alter the gut microbiome, which we know can trickle down and cause a lot of different health issues.
So yeah, when your gut microbes are imbalanced, that sends a lot of dysfunctional signals around the body. And so that can lead to inflammation long term, and that can lead to you not feeling full as quick and eating more to get that satiety feeling. So your gut microbes play a big role in that. And really everything we're talking about today has an effect on that gut microbiome.
Yes, definitely. So the next ingredient we want to look out for, which I think this one kind of blew up, like what was it? Early 2000s. You heard a lot about, maybe early 2000s. You heard a lot about MSG, and people all of a sudden were like, whoa, this is bad. And it started getting into migraines and some other health issues. But we know that it can also lead to insulin resistance.
Yeah, so they use it because it enhances the flavor and you get that meaty kind of taste, that umami taste. So that's why they're using MSG with it. So instead of just putting fish sauce or meat, they're using this.
And that's another cheap option. That's one of the reasons they're using it, because it's cheaper. You can make a lot of food taste really good with a little bit of MSG.
And so it's also linked to leptin resistance. So remember, we've talked about that in previous videos, but that satiety, hunger hormone. And so if your brain is resistant to that, then you are going to be hungry and you want to eat more. MSG has been linked to that resistance of that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of names for MSG. Don't let this stress you out, because I know how it can feel. Oh, now I got to look for this. Now I got to look for that. I got to remember this entire list. That's not necessarily the case. Dr. George mentioned if you can't pronounce it, if you don't recognize it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but look how long this list is. There's a chance that if you don't recognize it or you can't pronounce it, it's probably something you should be consuming. Now, something in this list, there's things that soy sauce, pectin, some of these things aren't necessarily an alternate for MSG, but it's there because sometimes it can mean there is MSG contained. So you want to make sure you can trust the companies, you're doing a little better research, and you're asking questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it has more than probably 10 ingredients, there's a good chance it has something bad in it.
Yeah. Sorry. We're not making it easier. And so there's also food dyes in everything anymore. Pickles. Like, why do you need to dye pickles? It's crazy. Of course, anything kid related, because they want to make it look flashy and make it appealing to kids. But don't think that just because you're an adult, you're not getting marketed to, because obviously we are getting marketed to as well.
But yeah, look, so it's to produce more vibrant colors to pop out at you, but it's made from petroleum. So it's the same thing for gasoline, diesel, and asphalt and tar. What it's being derived from, I don't want to eat petroleum. So I'm like, I don't want to make my food look however it's going to look, but I don't need extra things to make it look good. That's coming from petroleum. And so these are the typical ones. Mostly red 40, yellow 5 and 6 are going to be the ones you see the most in there. But
yeah, so like Dr. George said, that some research out of Purdue, these high levels of consumption that we're consuming now have never been tested for safety. Maybe lower levels back when food dyes started becoming more prevalent were studied, but they weren't tested at the levels that we're consuming or that are available now. And B, they're not being tested in conjunction with each other. So we just don't actually know the safety of them. But you'll see here in a second, we already know from the not super updated studies that we do have, they're still not great. So probably at the higher levels and in conjunction with each other, it's most likely going to be worse.
And when you look at animal studies, it's not favorable either. That's kind of telling us, hey, maybe we need to pay attention to this a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's toxicological studies that, like we said, have been done decades ago, and they were done by the chemical companies themselves.
Which
and
is
so
bias. That's bias, basically. You want independent studies, because who knows what the statistics are going to say when you're testing your own thing.
Yeah, it might be easier to sway the results. They're done one dye at a time, not multiple, and we just consume so much. You look at any ingredient list, like I said, it's in pickles. And if it's in pickles, then it's everywhere. And you probably already have seen that. But yeah, so there have been 2007, there was a study done, and some of those food dyes and preservatives can cause neurological issues and behavioral issues in children, causing them to be hyperactive and distractible. And listen, if it happens in kids, it's going to happen in adults. It just may not manifest in the same way. So it's not like kids are completely different animals than us.
Or instead of hyperactivity, maybe it's lack of focus.
Brain fog.
And so you just look out for these things. And a lot of the companies are getting better. They're starting to color things with more natural things, which I mean, why not? Like beetroot powder is like one of the things that is red instead of the artificial red color.
Yeah, so, turmeric for yellow.
Yeah, so there's definitely some options that are starting to come out because there's being pushback from. So, and that's what happens. We need to be aware of these things. We can create that pushback so we get better products.
Yeah. So the companies change. And you know what? I think maybe it's on the next slide, but we'll talk about other countries are already doing it. America, for as advanced as we are, just really behind the times as when it comes to health and food safety.
Yeah, we typically will try to follow the European recommendations because they're pretty on top of things as far when it comes to banning things. Although we did just ban brominated vegetable oil, so that's good. So that's no longer able to be used anymore. But we'll talk about some of those things in another video. But yeah, food coloring.
Yeah. So food dyes can also be related to neurobehavioral toxicity. It can be associated with, like we said, behavioral changes, restlessness. When we're talking about like adults not being able to focus at work or being irritated more easily, difficult sleeping, depression. Does this ring a bell? And inhibited mitochondrial respiration, which we know there's billions of mitochondria in our body. They're in every single cell in multiples.
Yeah, and so that's really important. So it's inhibiting our mitochondrial function. That's basically what that's saying. So,
and what do mitochondria do? They produce energy, but they also, among other things, produce our hormones, including our sex hormones. So you see a nation that has low sex drive, has overweight, obese, crazy periods, no periods, issues with conception.
Not saying it's just food dyes, but it's probably a combination of all of these things that's just never been studied.
Yeah, and it's just added, it's compounded. There's the food dyes, and then there's the lack of exercise, and then there's the chemicals in our air. It's just what can we control? You control what you can and you manage what you can't. We can 100% control what's going into our bodies. So this is a really good first step. That's why a lot of people start with diet, because it's a very controllable thing. It's not easy, but it's doable. So yeah, we were talking about the UK. So the UK banned toxic artificial dyes from being used in their foods. And so now they're using things like beets, carrots, turmeric, pumpkins, berries for food dyes. And it's not as cheap, but it's also not going to kill them as fast. So there are options. And like Dr. George said, there's companies, even in America, that are doing better now with these alternatives.
And look at what they're getting it from. It's the things that you should be eating anyways. It's natural foods that don't have an ingredient list. And so we need some more products like that.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think just knowing that there's like Walmart, Coca-Cola, Mars, which makes a lot of candy bars and snack foods, they don't use, because of these laws, they took some of those things out, the artificial colors, the sodium benzoate, aspartame from their UK products. Same company, different country. So these companies know that it's an issue, but not to get down on America, because I love our country. But if other countries are doing it, there's probably a good reason.
Yeah, and the research is starting to mount on that. So we're just behind the times a little bit. Doesn't mean you can't just cut these things out
you can
to benefit your health.
Yeah, Coca-Cola isn't going to come to your house and shove their down your throat.
And most people know, if I'm like, do you think Coca-Cola is good for you or bad for you? What do you think that answer is? Most people are like, well, it's probably not good for me. But in things in moderation, definitely, but this shouldn't be a part of the regular regimen. Right. Really, we've cut all these out anyways.
And like aspartame and artificial color free Coca-Cola is still Coke. So yeah, just get it out of your life, especially if you don't feel good, you're trying to lose weight, you're stalling on your weight loss journey. Everybody here, I think, knows we should not be drinking Coke, right? And everyone in this group already knows that. So we're going to stop beating that dead horse. But yeah, food dyes are in a lot of things, like we said. And obviously they're going to be in like things that are bright blue and yellow and red. Now you go to a kid's birthday party and the frosting on the cupcakes is neon. And it's hard to tell your kids no when everybody else is having fun. But when the frosting is this color, I don't feel bad. I say, no, I'm not dealing with you after eating blue.
Yeah, and there's even some research that was saying, well, is it really the sugar that is making the kids go crazy after they eat it, or is it all these artificial food dyes? So we need to start questioning some of these things. And yeah, it's hard. And it's really tough especially in the world of the kids. You go to a ball game and they want to have snacks afterwards, and it's this artificial junk that they're giving them. And I'm like, no, I don't stand for it.
Yeah. And so when we're getting back to talking about reading ingredient lists, yeah. So, like this thing definitely is going to have food dyes, whatever. But you really do have to, like I said, pickles have yellow food dyes a lot of the time. So even for things that you think are safe, You still have to look. And if you're deciding right now, and we'll talk about action steps, but if you're deciding, okay, this is so much, I am just going to avoid food dyes and I'm going to get serious about food dyes. You've got to look at your bacon's ingredient list. Meat.
Trying to make it appealing
Yeah.
to you. So they're going to color it so
Yeah.
it pops out at you. Yeah.
You just gotta look.
Read your ingredients.
And then there's artificial sweeteners, which there was this big thing where, this diet, like the diet fad, diet sodas, diet this, diet that, diet like Little Debbie cakes. Come on, if you're going to be on a diet, you don't need to be eating Little Debbie.
A good rule of thumb too is if animals aren't going to eat it, it's probably not a good. If you put a lot of that stuff on the ground, ants walk around it. They don't even eat it. And that's probably a good sign that it's not food.
Yeah. So artificial sweeteners became popular because 100%, 95%, it was a marketing thing. People don't want to eat sugars. People know sugar is bad for them. People basically can put together that sugar is making them fat. The only thing. And so they're like, well, this is diet. This has no sugar. And so you start to look at things that say no sugar, zero sugar, Coke zero. They just have artificial sweeteners. It's not that, if it tastes sweet, it's got something in it that's making it taste that way. So there's a sweet taste, there's less calories. And this is an issue because this continuous exposure to the sweet taste, your brain to some degree, your brain is very smart, but your brain to some degree just tastes sweet. It doesn't taste aspartame versus cane sugar. It tastes sweet. And that sweet reward will create this cycle in your brain to say, I like this. This tastes good. Let me eat more of this. But that can become a problem because you're not getting enough nutrients because there's no nutrient density to that food. So then you consume more. And so you're getting into this overconsumption loop where you're just never satisfied.
So it's an emotional tie to lights up your amygdala, which is your emotional center. So you eat those things, you feel good, and then 15 minutes later, you feel crappy. That's what the food's actually doing to you. You're just having that emotional response, that feel good feeling that you associated to that food from whatever time period, but it's really not good. You're just associating that feeling. And so, yeah, you got to break the patterns
and the
addiction of some of these sugars. So, and really, if it's sweet, it's got sugar alcohol. There's some sort of sweetener that's in.
Yeah. Honey, stevia, monk fruit, that tastes sweet too. Your body has a different physiological response to all of these. And so just because it's sweetened with honey or stevia, and those aren't artificial sweeteners, those are.
So stevia and monk fruit, as of right now, maybe okay. So the research is still pending on some of those stuff. But honey, for the most part, that's a natural thing. If you're going to have a sweetener, that's pretty good to use honey, and it's still going to have a glucose impact. So you're going to keep it limited.
Yeah.
And anything sweet, that's what you're going to try to do. You don't want to just have a bunch of it because sugar and still will get turned to fat if you have too much of it. But yeah, you're just trying to still live life.
Yeah. Get that balance in there. So yeah, we had talked about like the trouble with artificial sweeteners, the overconsumption, and actually the use of, so there is this inconclusive thing that sugar consumption since the year 2000 has not necessarily led to or decrease in sugar consumption hasn't necessarily led to a decrease in obesity, right? We're still obesity is still a very big problem, even though overall sugar consumption has gone down. And I would posit that from this other research article, that it's because our artificial sweetener consumption had increased. We're kind of tilting the teeter-totter. So we're not doing as much sugar because we're consuming more artificial sweeteners. So is it better for your diet to do artificial sweeteners versus sweeteners? I don't think so.
Your brain thinks it's the same thing.
Yeah. And artificial sweeteners, they're linked to cardiovascular disease, cancer risk, detrimental changes to the gut microbiome, like we talked about, leaky gut, inflammation, of course, overweight and obesity. So we know that artificial sweeteners are not a get out of jail free card.
One time again, we see you change your diet and you cut out the artificial sugars and things like that, and you don't have cravings like you do. You fix your gut and the cravings aren't there. So the reason you're having those cravings is probably because there's an imbalance in that microbiome.
Yep. So then there's the added sugar story. So these are actual sugars, which still we don't want to go crazy on. We don't want to swing the pendulum back the other way when you're going crazy with artificial sweeteners. We don't want to go all the way back saying, okay, we'll do real sugar again. Let's just kind of moderate our overall sweet intake.
Yeah, just you're trying to limit the added sugars in general anyways.
Yeah.
And something I like to just have patients do, I'm take a food journal. for 2-3 days and let's see what you're eating. Just put everything you put it in there, and then see how many carbohydrates do I just have in a day. And you'll be surprised. Most people, a typical American, eats way too many carbohydrates, and so that's going to lead to a lot of issues.
Yeah, and we like apps for the food journals, because if you're putting in things or you're scanning barcodes, they'll put in not only the macronutrients, but they'll put in the added sugar. So you'll get to see not only how many carbohydrates you're eating, but how many of those carbohydrates are added sugars. So that's a really nice way to see it, because if you're writing it down, which is great to know what you're eating, but if you're writing it down, you're not necessarily getting the full picture of everything that you're consuming. So the US population, we actually consume over 300% of the daily recommended amount of sugar. And that's based on the US's daily recommended amounts, which we're still not overly impressed with. I still think they're like a little bit too lax, but over 300% of a pretty lax number to begin with is a lot of sugar. And the AHA, which is the American Heart Association, recommends limiting daily sugar. Actually, I was pretty surprised to see this number specifically: 25 grams a day for women and 37.5 grams a day for men, which it's still a lot. But I would say if we're over 300% of that right now, if we could just get it down to that. If the people in this group, if you're one of the 300%ers, if you could just get it down to women, 25 grams a day.
Yeah, typically like 50 to 100 grams total carbohydrates in a day is really, that's what we should be shooting. Most people that start to track are like 300 plus grams of carbohydrates. So that's including all of that carbohydrate.
Yeah, that's not just sugars.
Plus sugar, but that's just a lot. Carbohydrates turn into sugar within the body, and that's what your body has to manage that intake.
Yeah, so looking at that, your sugars and your ingredient lists. Not all sugars act the same in the body. Glucose, which is kind of like the most simple form of sugar, so that's kind of like your white sugar, that gets deposited into that subcutaneous level, that adipose tissue, like that's the fat that you see basically. Fructose, which is a little bit more of a complex molecule of sugar, that gets deposited and stored in visceral adipose tissue, which is the fat around your organs, which actually is, I don't want to say it's worse for you, but that's a scary place to have a lot of fat tissue, is around your internal organs.
Yeah.
So we just need to pay attention to where we eat, obviously.
Yeah, and I like this slide just because if you measure this out and just see what does 16 teaspoons of sugar look like? Go do that. Go grab sugar and put it on until you get 16 teaspoons. That's a lot of sugar. And you're like, oh, I drink like 3 of these a day. I'm like, okay, triple that number of sugar, the amount of sugar. And then the French fries is always comical too. Yeah, there's sugar.
Yeah, and so I think it's 4 grams of sugar, like on an ingredient list, it's either 3 or 4 grams of sugar is equal to 1 teaspoon. So if you're looking at your ingredient list and you're like, okay, 6 grams of sugar, that seems pretty low, because it'll give you like a percentage for the daily recommended amount or whatever. 6 grams is 1.5 teaspoons. So if you, like Dr. said, if you take 1.5 teaspoons in a spoon and just put it in your mouth, and we know that's not good for us. So that's what is happening in your food. You're just not seeing it.
Yeah, and some of these pictures will be, if you go look, different companies will have different amount of sugar in them and whatnot. But yeah, just the whole point of this is read your ingredients.
And of your healthy foods too, because like yogurt, people eat yogurt for their health. Cereal, I would never call Yoplait or cereal a healthy food anymore.
Yogurt, you don't want any added sugar. 0.
Yeah. So we just know that added sugars can obviously relate to added weight gain. This is what I was trying to look for. We know that empty calories, they lead to overeating, they lead to excess liver storage of sugar in the fat cells. It can lead to sugar addictions. And when we take people off sugar, they feel those detox symptoms or those withdrawal symptoms. You get the headache, you get angry. Of course, you get cravings, and it's a real addiction. So it's a real withdrawal. And so then with sugar and sugar overload, we also see the unregulated or high blood sugar levels. We've talked about blood sugar and insulin resistance. That can lead to inflammation and body pain. So then you don't want to go work out. It can lead to fatigue. So you don't want to go work out or make good decisions. It can lead to negative effects on cardiovascular function. So then we're making ourselves just overall sick, not just overweight. And then it can also lead to that mental fatigue, brain fog, decreased lack of motivation. so you don't go work out or you don't make good choices. And so it's just like this trickle down. It's not just, yeah, sugar makes you fat. No, it's because of all these different nuanced ways that your body responds to the sugar and all these other artificial food dyes, MSG.
Yeah, and it's just really you don't realize how bad it is till you cut it out.
And it's not easy. We're not saying it's easy to cut it out, but at some point we got to do it. So there's of course a billion names for added sugars. You can see here. So yeah, you're looking, you're like, oh, well, at least it's turbinado sugar. And, okay. And that's fine. That's probably a better option than some of these other things, but
Still sugar.
Still sugar. So just know your goals, know what you're reading the ingredient list for and why you're reading it. Just be aware. So
what can you do?
And this is important to us because we don't want to just say everything you're doing is wrong and America sucks. We want to say, here are some things that you need to be aware of and what can you do next. And some of you may be on this journey already. You may have done some of these things.
And I'll tell you, like, if you avoid one at a time, it's going to be good because most of the time multiple are in it. So if you're avoiding one, you're probably going to be avoiding multiple. So yeah, pick one, start cutting it out, and then like when you replace the stuff in your pantry, replace it with a better option.
Yep. And then, and then go from there. So work on avoiding one. And then once you're like, yeah, I've got a pretty good handle on avoiding some or all of these things, then you start saying, okay, I am only going to buy items from now on that have fiberless ingredients. And there can still be like some of the negative or the red flag ingredient list items in those, but you're at least eliminating, you're not eating Doritos that have an ingredient list this long. Then from there, reduce that sugar intake. And probably if you've gotten to this point, you've already reduced your sugar intake by a good amount. But, start looking at your overall sugar intake. And then in best case scenario, we're just avoiding items with ingredient lists because, it doesn't have MSG, a steak or an apple. So things without ingredient list, exactly what's in there.
Yep. There's a lot of companies coming out with better ingredients, but Whole Foods is going to be the best option.
Whole Foods as in actual food, not the grocery store Whole Foods, which still has good options. But here's some of our references. We just want to keep that in there in case you want to go look at some of those references and studies. But so take some of those action steps. Again, don't let it be so overwhelming that you like get this paralysis by analysis. Like, I can't do everything, so I'm going to do nothing. Don't do that. Just start looking at, this weekend when you're going shopping, just even if you don't change anything, start looking at the ingredients.
Yeah. And like start paying attention to when you eat. Like, oh, I ate a half a bag of chips and I'm still hungry. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, let's eat something that has nutrition in it, some nutrition in it, then you're full.
Yeah. You don't want to eat that whole bag of chips.
Yeah. And so you can start pairing more meat and eat your protein and fats first, and then maybe go for that because you'll fill up and then you won't want that. So just take those steps.
Yeah. Give yourself some grace. It's not easy, but you're already on this journey. And so we're always just trying to let you know that we are here to support you. If you have questions about any of that content or like other ingredient lists, I know there's other things that are ingredient lists that we didn't talk about in those 5 today. And we're going to be continuing on this conversation, specifically reading ingredient lists, because we know that is a big struggle for a lot of people that are trying very hard to make good decisions. So we'll talk more in the future about other ingredients.
Yeah, even on the people that are on the gluten-free world, like there's a ton of added sugar in the gluten-free stuff. So pay attention to that. And really, ask yourself, well, what's the point of, if I'm going off of gluten, why am I going off gluten? Is it because of like, am I reacting to gluten, or am I reacting to grains in general, or am I trying to get my blood sugar stabilized? That's still gluten-free stuff is most likely going to still spike your blood sugar. So maybe look at what's the point of you going off of it, and see from there where to go.
Yeah. So good luck. Yeah. But you'll find that the more you do it, the easier it gets, the more natural it becomes. And it's just kind of second nature at this point, so you'll do fine. Okay. Let us know if you have questions. Goodbye.